Hey there, welcome back to another video. Glad to have you as always. Today we're going to walk you through the process of measuring for servo travel and checking for and adjusting band clearance in a 704 4L60E transmission. So there may be a number of reasons why you want to do this, but primarily you want to ensure that your band clearance is appropriate. And so one of the ways we do that is we check for servo travel either on reassembly or while the transmission is in the vehicle, whether it to be just during the course of assembly to make sure that we get everything right, or in the case if the transmission is still in the vehicle, we're either installing a different servo assembly, or we're trying to diagnose a late harsh 1-2 shift condition and maybe even coupled with a 3-2 downshift flare that isn't attributable to trouble code P1870 or a broken 1-2 outer accumulator spring. So we have the transmission on the stand, it's fully assembled. The only thing we haven't added yet is the filter and the pan. And if you're doing this process within where the trans is still in the vehicle, you want to have the pan off and the filter out of the way so that you can get relatively unobstructed access to the band, because you're going to need to validate through a procedure we'll show you in a minute what your band clearance is before and after servo travel measurements and adjustments. So everything I'm showing you here is going to apply to 700R4. It also applies to the 204R, though the measurements we're going to manage to are going to be a little bit different. Now, there's a myriad of instructions in the literature available both in print and online about how to do this. I'll link Sonic's instructions because I think they're probably the most thorough, at least that I've seen. But the one aspect that I'll kind of deviate from their instructions in terms of what to manage to when it comes to servo travel is the ranges that they give you. Okay, Sonics tells you to seek travel between 75 and 125 thousandths, or maybe it's 50 and 125 thousandths. Okay, the low end number is fine. All right, I always shoot for the low end. The high end, 125 thousandths, in my humble opinion, is a little bit too much. It gives you a little bit too much band clearance. In a stock application, that's not necessarily going to be a problem, but if you're doing anything mild to high performance, or where maybe you have a heavy-duty towing or hauling type rig, that becomes more of a critical issue. So I prefer to manage to a range of between 40 thousandths and 85, or at most 90 thousandths. So let's just call it 90 thousandths on the high end. I think that gives you a band clearance that is a perfect balance between not inducing any drag, right? The band around the drum is not too tight, and it's also not so loose. It basically precludes any possibility that you might have a 3-2 flare on wide open throttle downshifts. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll set up the dial indicator and show you the process of doing the initial measurement, and then we'll walk through some iterative adjustments so that you can see what we do to dial in that clearance to get it to exactly where we want it, and then we'll show you how to validate your servo travel adjustment on the band itself. All right, so we have the camera focusing in here on the band. We have an orange paint mark on the band just to kind of distinguish it from the darker background so you can see it move. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a flat blade screwdriver, and all we're going to do is we're going to move the band longitudinally. So in other words, in this direction, and see how far it travels. Now, if you've been doing this long enough, you'll kind of know just by eye what 1/8 of an inch looks like versus 1/4 of an inch versus something less than 1/8 or whatever the case. But the range of movement we want to manage to is between 1/8 and 3/16 of an inch. If it's any more than 3/16 of an inch, then we want to tighten it up. If it's like 1/16 or less, we'll really want to scrutinize the movement by rotating the output shaft to see if there's any hint of drag. But generally speaking, we want to keep to that 1/8 of an inch travel longitudinally there of the band along the reverse input drum. So we're just going to kind of pry forward up on the band like this, get it as far forward as we possibly can, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to just push it rearward. Okay, gotta get my blade on it. So it's literally as simple as this. And this is why you want the pan off when you go about checking and adjusting for servo travel. So again, I don't have a ruler or anything like that down there, but by eye, this is looking about 1/4 of an inch or so, and it's too much. And I mean, you're unfortunately not gonna have the luxury of, you know, staring down into the case bore and looking at the band, over its entire circumference around the reverse input drum when this is in the vehicle, and that's why I'm filming it like this. But if you were to have that magical ability, you would see that that band is, as the servo's in the rest position, there's a lot of space between the band and reverse input drums. So we want to take up some of that slack so that the 1-2 shift is short, smooth, or at least timed such that there's no late harsh abruptness to it. And at the same token, we want to avoid any kind of flaring on the 3-2. And I guess we could say that that's the premise of this video, right? We're trying to diagnose some sort of shifting issue with the band on the 1-2 transition and the 3-2 transition. And we're going to assume that, we have a slight flare on the 3-2 and we have a late harsh 1-2 upshift. Otherwise, if we only had a, late harsh 1-2 upshift, it could very well be, P1870, the regulator and isolator valve for the torque converter, and the valve body is worn, which is very common, especially in the 95 to 2000 4L60Es. We could also assume that there's a broken 1-2 accumulator outer spring in the housing. Let's assume we check that just to do our due diligence, and we found that the springs are both intact and in good shape, no issues with the piston. So that's kind of the premise of what we're, or I guess the scenario we're running here. We have a late harsh 1-2 upshift. There's no trouble codes. And we also have a slight flare on a wide open or very heavy throttle angle 3-2 downshift. All right, so now what we're going to do is pull the servo out, and I'll show you a couple of different techniques or methods that you can use to make your adjustments so that we can tighten this up and get it to an appropriate clearance so that we don't have those conditions when this thing goes back in, or if you're trying to fix a transmission already in the vehicle so that you can cure this issue. All right, we're going to go ahead and take out the servo, but one thing I recommend you do before you even do that is spin the drive shaft. Now, the caveat here is that you have the vehicle up on all 4 jack stands and that the transmission's in neutral so that you can spin it without any issues. And so you want to spin it in the opposite direction of engine rotation so that you can get a sense and a feel for what no drag actually feels like when you're spinning the reverse input drum underneath the band. And so that when you go and you reinstall the servo to do like kind of a trial fit and test after you've made an adjustment, if there is drag, you'll know right away. So I always like to do that because it's a good kind of before and after, just a muscle memory comparison, so that even if I'm like, say, within my supposed band travel spec of 1/8, if I'm feeling drag, then that means I'm, a little too tight and I need to further fine tune before I call it good. All right, so if you're doing this in the car, we have the trans upside down here in the stand, but let's just pretend it's in the car or truck. What you'll want to do is you want to take a pry bar and you're going to want to lever against the transmission tunnel. So what I like to do is I will go ahead and put the back of the pry bar onto the servo cover just like this, and then I will lever against the transmission tunnel. And that's usually sufficient to get this cover in far enough where you can pop the snap ring right out. Now, I don't actually have anything to lever against, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to position my flat blade screwdriver here, and then I'm just going to tap on the cover so I can get in behind it, and I'll pop the snap ring right out. Now, I have an entire box full of these outer, these cover O-rings, so I really don't care if I break this one or not. I'll put another one on. And frankly, I would recommend that you replace your servo seals anyway, your O-rings and your scarf cut sealing rings. But, let's just say for whatever reason you don't have that, or you know, whatever, you're trying to preserve this O-ring, what you want to do is take a pick just like this, you know, kind of get up in there and get the pick so that you can get you know, 2 fingers on each side, and then all you're going to do is pull out on the cover until it comes out. All right, so now you have the outboard half of the assembly. So this is going to be your 4th gear apply piston. As you can see, we already have a spacer ring installed, or a shim installed, to adjust our servo travel. That's not enough. And then of course you have your O-ring. Now if you follow this you know, method and you don't cut the O-ring or you don't damage it, then you can put it back in. I mean, you can reuse it as long as it's otherwise in good shape. But again, I would recommend that if you're doing this with the trans in the vehicle and it has this, you know, these O-rings or sealing rings haven't been serviced ever, at least as far as you know, I would just replace them. So we have the O-ring here for the you know, 2nd gear piston housing, and then we have the O-ring here. This is an O-ring, not a scarf cut ring. This is like a Viton kit that I installed. This one's for band release. So when fluid comes in here and pushes the servo off, this seals against that bore, allowing that to happen. All right, let's go to the bench and we'll take a look at a couple of adjustment options that are available. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do a trial fit after we make one of those adjustments and see what kind of servo travel we have and what kind of band clearance we have after we've made that adjustment. All right, so with the servo on the bench, let's talk about methods of adjustment. So there's a few different approaches that you could take. First one involves the use of these golden shims. Now these shims come from Transgo in their shift kits, and I believe they give you 2 in each kit. So if you have a real excessive amount of band clearance and or, you know, a lot of servo travel, you can run either one or both of these. Now each of these shims is 55 thousandths thick, and unfortunately there's not like you know, a shim pack that you could purchase that have, you know, different thicknesses of shim, at least not that I'm aware of. If you know of one, please post in the comments. I'd be very grateful. I'll buy a whole bunch of them. But as far as I know, all these shims are all the same thickness. So we have one already on there that's 55 thousandths thick. So we could try putting another one on and see what that, you know, does for us. Now, if you don't have the shift kit and you don't have these shims, then the other option for you is purchase a longer apply pin. So this is going to be GM part number 8680501, and this is what we refer to as a no groove apply pin. So there are no grooves on the end of this pin, you know, like what you see here on this one. Okay, so no grooves indicates that this is the longest apply pin that's available. Single groove pin would be, you know, a little bit shorter than this. Then you have these, which are the most common. At least that's, you know, I very rarely see the no groove or the single groove. And then there's one that has 3 grooves, and that's even shorter. So, you know, obviously if we put that on, it'd be even worse. So that's another option for you. All right, now if you don't have, you know, the ability to get a longer apply pin and you don't have these shims, and for whatever reason you don't want to spend the money or you can't and you get them, maybe it's really more of a time thing, then what you can do, assuming you have a welder, is you can weld on the end of the pin. So what I would do if I were to ever do this, I'm not a welder, but if I were, I would grind this perfectly flat, okay, get rid of the rounded edge, then I would start welding on it, and I would want to make sure that I penetrate into the steel on the end of this pin, and then whatever I have on top of it, I would then grind down to length, polish it so that it's nice and smooth and rounded on the end, and then I would test fit it and go from there. All right, those are the 3 methods. Now you can also, if let's just say one shim isn't enough but 2 shims is too much, then you can take the 2 shims, install them, and then start grinding a little bit on the end of the pin to get it dialed in just right. So those are the options. Now, if you're working with a Sonex Super Hold second gear servo kit, they're going to provide an overlength apply pin, and you'll need to grind that to length. And you know, they give you all the instructions on how to do that. And I'll link them in the description. I think they're actually the same instructions that they give you for measuring the servo travel, so you know, you'll have those available. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the second gear servo housing O-ring and the O-ring here on the inboard side. This is normally a scarf cut seal, but I'm using a Viton kit. You know, it doesn't really matter either which way. These seal marginally a little bit better. But regardless, you don't want to have this seal or this seal on, and you don't want to put the cover seal back on either. So we'll get rid of that. All right, you could leave this inner seal on. That's not going to interfere with anything. But having these other seals off, or these O-rings off, makes this a little bit easier. All right, so I'm going to reinstall this, and then we'll take a look and see what kind of servo travel we have and what kind of band clearance we have. I'm hoping that this is actually too tight. I mean, no, I guess maybe I'm hoping it's just right, but the likelihood is very minimal. If it's too tight and I'm binding, then at least I know, based on the thicknesses of each of these little spacers, how much I need to take off this pin so that I can get it just right. All right, assembly's back in, dial indicator set up. No O-rings or sealing rings or anything like that on there, so let's go ahead and do a check. Now zero the indicator first. Okay, looks like it's about 28 thou. We're not quite returning back to zero. Let's try it again. Okay, this time we're at 30 thou, maybe 31 thou. Same 31, 32 thousandths. So, I mean, I know there's a little bit of variance there with those three measurements, but I'm comfortable saying that, 30 thou, 31 thou is where we're at, which is a little on the tight side. Okay, and I figured we'd be tight. The likelihood of us being spot on was minimal, just given what I know about these things. So let's go ahead and move the camera. We'll take a look at band clearance, following the same procedure we did just a few minutes ago, and then we'll spin the output shaft. So my guess is it will have either basically no travel to maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but let's take a look and see. All right, come with the screwdriver. Okay, I'm on the band, prying it as far forward as I can, and now we're going to push it to the rear. Forward and rearward. Forward and rearward. All right, that actually looks pretty good, which is surprising. I don't normally see band clearance like this with servo travel as little as 30 thousandths, but that's what it looks like. So let's get it all the way forward, and we'll do it one more time so that we can, I guess, confirm or deny what we may be seeing already. All right, that actually looks better than I thought I would see. So now I'm going to spin the output shaft and you know, see if I could detect any kind of drag. And I'll be honest, it's not dragging at all. Or if it is, it's imperceptible. I mean, it feels just like it did when the you know, when the servo was initially installed and had all that band clearance. So we're able to move this band right around 1/8 of an inch. I mean, that's the kind of movement that you'd want to see. So if you were, you know, had the privileged position of looking at this thing on, you know, either on the stand, looking down on it, and you can readily see what the clearance is all the way around the circumference of the reverse input drum that band has at rest position, then, you know, you would be able to truly confirm or deny that it's either good or, you know, maybe you should open it up a little. All right, we have the servo reassembled, and after I ended the last segment and before I started this one, I actually did decide to take a little bit off the top, okay, or off the tip I should say. And the reason being is when I spun the output shaft again after the servo was completely removed, I did feel like there was a little bit of a difference, so there might have been a little bit of drag, and that does square with the measurement I took, being in the neighborhood of 30 thousandths, and you know, where we really want to be is at least 50, so makes sense. And so now we're going to go ahead and reinstall it, and we'll see, you know, what we can come up with. So make sure that there's plenty of assembly lube in the bore as well as on your you know, on your O-rings and whatnot, and then just go ahead and install the servo. Now if you do not have assembly lube, I mean, I would recommend you get it, but if you don't and you can't find it for whatever reason, you can use petroleum jelly. Petroleum jelly is also fine for, you know, this application. It's the same stuff really. This is just blue colored petroleum jelly with, you know, maybe a couple other ingredients mixed in, but bottom line is I wouldn't use transmission fluid by itself or WD-40. You really need some sort of lube here. All right, let's go ahead and do a travel check. Our indicator at 0. Okay, so 50 thou. It's like 50 thou, maybe 55 thousandths. You know, before I move the indicator itself. Let's try one more time. Oop. All right, 52, 55 thousandths. That's kind of where we want to be. And that weird squeaking noise you heard was actually my shoe against this floor. So, in case you're wondering if it was something else. All right, so now we can do a band clearance check and see what that looks like. And I'll spin the output shaft. And incidentally, this screeching or squeaking sound you hear is the low roller clutch as we're spinning, you know, the output shaft in a direction engine rotation. So if you hear that, that's perfectly normal. In fact, that's kind of what you want to hear. This is a brand new low roller clutch in here. So we're now spinning in the opposite direction. And that feels a lot better actually. Now that I've had a chance to compare both the initial, you know, feel when we did this without doing any adjustments to when we had just the two golden rings but we didn't grind on the pin, versus now we've ground on the pin and it feels real nice, like there's no drag whatsoever. All right, last thing to do is look at band clearance. So we'll set up the camera there, make one final check of the band clearance, make sure it's okay, and then we'll be done. All right, let's go ahead with that one final check on the band. All right, that's about 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch. It's markedly less than it was prior, and it's not quite as tight as it was when we just simply put the 2 shims in there without doing anything to the pin as far as grinding. So I'm happy with the way this has turned out. We have 50 to 55 thousandths of inboard travel in the servo. What we see here, as far as band clearance check, and what I feel when I spin the output shaft in the counterclockwise, squares with what proper band clearance and servo travel setup should look like and should be when it's all done right. So you can air check the combined 2nd and 4th gear apply circuit via the little hole that you see above the servo. So let me just move the camera a little bit. Alright, so right here, this is going to be your exhaust for your 4th apply. So if you wanted to, you can certainly put air in there. And while you're doing this, you may want to put a finger or 2 on the band, not under the band, mind you, or you're not going to be able to do that, but you just want to put it on the band, 1 or 2 fingers, so that you can feel that band applying and grabbing that drum. All right, and then a well sealing circuit is such that when you put air in, let go of the nozzle, it takes maybe a couple of seconds for that air to fully exhaust. All right, I mean, like I said, this nozzle sucks, but you get the idea. All right, hope this video has helped you with understanding how to set up your servo for proper travel and how to measure for and adjust band clearance so that you have a transmission that shifts correctly, that there's no flaring or any kind of real late harsh 1-2 upshift. If you have that issue, you can certainly approach it by trying to solve it via the servo. Now, if the band is simply worn to the point where it's, no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to, get that shift the way you want it, then at that point, depending on the amount of miles on it, it's only going to be a matter of time before you're going to have to pull the transmission out and overhaul it, replace all the soft parts inside, including the band. But transmission's otherwise healthy. Installing a shift kit is probably going to be your best bet. To just, something that's out of the box, all the instructions ready to go, and you can go through this, exercise that we did here today to dial in that band clearance just right. All right, thanks so much for watching. As always, greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. Otherwise, I'll continue to produce more videos on the 700R4s, 4L60Es for you. If there's anything in particular you want me to dig in a little bit deeper and show as a topical video, or if you just want to see more videos on destruction, either way, we will get those out and posted to the channel as soon as I can. Thanks so much again. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and we'll see you on the next one.